Hey guys, VaulSC here, hope that you're doing well. We're going to take a look at the new update for 100 Kingdoms in Conquest: The Last Argument of Kings. They have had a massive rework. It is the major update. We're going to do a deep dive into them this video and go over a lot of the changes and what they mean for 100 Kingdoms. Just starting with a few of the main takeaways. Number one, I realized that a new faction just came out. We're not going to talk about that in this video. They can come another time. Overall, I think the 100 Kingdoms update is an above-average one. It's pretty good. I'm very happy with how Conquest is at the moment. I'm not 100% happy with everything. I'm not 100% happy with the way that Parabellum is progressing, but overall, above average. And for me, that's pretty high praise. I'm the kind of person that really does talk a lot of trash when games developers make mistakes, and I'll be the first to call you out on things that I think are really, really bad. But net positive, I think, for 100 Kingdoms and Conquest in general. So I'll be talking a lot about the bits and pieces that I really do like. Just to get some of the small nitpicking out of the way, for example, I'm not exactly thrilled about the fact that all of the standard bearer upgrades for every single regiment are included in the cost now. I prefer that list building design be a little bit more granular in the sense that every time you add a regiment, you can choose to add a standard at an additional cost, given that you'll never always take them and you'll never take them, for example. It allows you a bit more control over the points you're spending on the regiment, and allows you to sort of fill that gap of 10 or 15 points that you may be missing at the end of the list build. And let's face it, I mean, the standard giving unstoppable and the +1 inch march when you bring it onto the table is just a generic benefit that's always going to be useful, but sometimes you're going to want to deprive yourself of that for the sake of saving points. So I just feel like Parabellum making that decision for us for the sake of, you know, people being able to assemble their miniatures and not worry about whether they're adding a standard bearer to their actual miniatures or not. I think that's a bit silly. They should just make it that, you know, the tournament legal stuff doesn't even look at the actual upgrades that you've got on your physical miniatures. So that's a small annoyance from me. The other thing that I have a little bit of a gripe about is that with the keyword system and the sub-factions and a lot of your choices being really built around a particular pathway through the army building list does make things a little bit restrictive. Less so than what you've seen with Wadroon, but a similar kind of problem. And although I play Wadroon quite a lot online on TTS and I enjoy them, I think that they're a really well-balanced faction, you know, in terms of against other factions externally. The internal balance is kind of annoying given that you have to sort of follow the route of all the tribes units or the speakers units, for example. And I'm seeing a little bit of that with 100 Kingdoms. Not as much, thankfully, but still a little bit of that. And the other thing that I noticed is that they're bringing in this mutual exclusivity with the orders versus the theists. You can't have them both in the same list in terms of the characters. I wouldn't have done that personally. I think that although the lore background of it is really cool that the orders don't want to work with the theists, I would simply have run it that you don't gain any you know, double faction advantages by having them in the same list, but you can choose to combine them if you want to. So say you have a Prior Commander Warlord and a Theist Priest, that prevents you from having any dynastic alliance bonuses at all. You can only have one Warlord in that case, but you can still build the list if you really want to. Because we can imagine them showing up to the battlefield and being a little bit hostile towards each other, but not so hostile that they're not actually going to stop the invasion of, like, the Old Dominion or Wadroon or something that's going to be directly attacking the 100 Kingdoms itself. So that's another thing that I picked up. For the more detailed stuff, we'll work our way through it, but yeah, I do like the fact that they have fixed some of the regiments not being as, and some of the items as not being as prominent as they were before, and the options for building your armies is different now. It's definitely had a shake-up, so I'm excited to see how that progresses and whether we're just going to form around one stagnant kind of meta like we did before, or whether it really is going to be viable to play a variety of different 100 Kingdoms lists going forward. I didn't feel like there were lots of ways to play 100 Kingdoms before this update, and right now I do feel like there are quite a few different viable options. Cool. So those are my opening thoughts. Let's perhaps dive into it a bit more. If you guys want to really see the actual wording of the rules, I'd totally recommend getting this PDF here, which is available from the announcements in Discord or from the direct website, and I think it's linked to in the Army Builder. There may be some inconsistencies between the PDF and the Army Builder, but it's always the PDF that is the one that you want to go by. With Army rules, when you choose your warlord, the warlord gives you a subfaction army rule as well as a supremacy ability. So because it does both of those, you've just got to bear in mind that if you go into the army builder here and pick the Imperial officer, and if you make him your warlord, there's this thing up top, I'll just grab it, that says rapid deployment. So that shows you the active turn supremacy you get by using this character's supremacy ability. But note that you'll get the subfaction rule from him as well. So when you work through to page number 6 of the PDF, and we find the 100 Kingdoms thing here, where is it? Oh, no, that's the actual army rules. Let's go down to page number 7, excuse me. So we've got rapid deployment, and then page 8 is where we have the specific rules for the Imperial officer, where he can activate his supremacy. So if we come back to the army builder, this is showing something you get only from having the Imperial officer, and then the combat maneuvers is something slightly different. This is the free reforms you get from him, and up here is where you see the Vanguard that he grants the army. The point that I'm trying to make is that if you add the Theist Priest, for example, the Theist Priest has the Spirit Shines, which allows you to get a free spell casting action, among other things. But there's an additional rule which is supposed to show up here, but at the time of recording this video, it doesn't. So Spirit Shines is his supremacy ability you see on page 8, but if I go back to page 7 and find March of the Faithful, it says that if the army's warlord has the Theist subfaction battlefield role, then he also gets this other rule here where your regiments get Divine Purpose, and when you're within 12 inches, they get Indomitable. So it's supposed to be showing that up, and when I first read through the Army Builder, I, for some reason, thought that your warlord that you actually select as your warlord gets both of those upgrades, whereas the dynastic ally that you pick here only gets the actual inbuilt activated supremacy. But that's actually not the case. They both have full access to those abilities we just talked about. All right. So let's go back up to page 6. Memories of the Red Years is the exclusivity thing where you can't have Theists and Orders at the same time. I already talked about that. I don't really love it, but it is what it is. Dynastic Alliances is effectively the same thing as what we had before. It just clears things up kind of nicely in the sense that you only have one warlord for point scoring purposes. So if your opponent kills your warlord and your dynastic ally, they don't get double points, and also they have to specifically kill your warlord to get the points in scenarios which apply to warlords. So what would happen previously is if we have this army list where you've got the officer and the priest, you only have to kill one of them to get the bonus objective points in a scenario like melee, for example. I think melee, that gives you, say, 2 extra points for killing a warlord. It has to specifically be the Imperial officer now, whereas in your list you can choose a dynastic ally who functions like a warlord but doesn't yield those points to your opponent. So that's a nice little change and clarifies how that works. Before, you might remember that we had the option of going the veterans route or the relentless drill route. It's sort of combined into two now. The veteran tag is really easy to get for a lot of regiments. Many of them come with veteran automatically, and for those that don't, it's fairly cheap to upgrade them to veterans. When they are a 5 or more stands, they get inspired automatically, but not always inspired. So, for example, if you're up against a enemy regiment who has the Dread special rule that turns off inspired, that will shut this down. But the point of getting it from just having a large regiment is that if you're sitting there with your big stack of 8 Gilded Legion and your Imperial Officer, and you're starting the turn in combat with some enemy Braves or something like that, and there's a unit of Thunder Riders about to charge you, what you can do is you can attack the Braves with your first class action, and it will benefit from Inspired without you having to actually use an action for Inspired, and then presuming you wipe out the Braves, you can then charge into the Thunder Riders nearby, assuming that you're in charge range, etc., because you still have a free action, and that's where that can be useful. The more important thing about this Relentless Drills upgrade, though, is that when you are getting the Resolve bonus for having a number of stands in your regiment, any bonus you're getting translates into plus command stands as well. So what that means is that if you have a group of 3 Mercenary Crossbowmen, which are light and they can't score, if you have 4 of them instead, they get +1 resolve because they are 4 or more stands, and therefore when you're on an objective zone, you get 1 stand worth of scoring, meaning that lights can score. It's also important to note that if you put your character in the light unit, that will also count as 4 stands. So a very common thing to do now will be to have your Imperial Officer or your Chapter Mage in a group of just 3 crossbows because they're light, and so long as you don't lose any of them, they're going to be able to score. You're typically going to have Vanguard in your list, so you can just march straight onto the table turn 1 a very long way. You cannot score during turn 1, but on turn 2 you can move straight onto the objective and score in turn 2 just as your opponent is trying to catch up, and that is a really big change. Very important, and we'll talk about that a little bit more soon. Moving on now to the sub-faction rules. This will effectively apply depending on which of the which characters you chose as your warlord or your dynastic ally. So where it says if the army warlord has the imperial subfaction role, it's really talking about this thing here where it says battlefield role. So there are only 2 that I can think of that have the imperial role, and that is, if I'm correct, the mage and the imperial officer. So I think there are 2 per subfaction. Rapid deployment for imperial, that is the imperial officer and the mage. Family traditions for feudal, well, that is going to be the noble lord and the mounted noble lord. Theist is going to be the crusader lord and the theist priest, and martial prowess is going to be the priory commander or the what's his name, the order of the shield. So that's pretty much how it's divided up. Rapid deployment is a Vanguard 5. Vanguard previously just meant 3 marches onto the battlefield, but now the 3rd move that you make is not your normal march distance. It's just a set value, which is 5 in this case, which is what it's going to be for most of your regiments anyway, like your Household Guard and your Gilded Legion, etc., etc. It just means that your archers, for example, the Hunter Cadre, which normally moves 6, don't get that additional inch, so it's not really that big of a factor. But I will say that rapid deployment is the best subfaction rule in my opinion, which is going to mean that almost all of your 100 Kingdoms lists are going to include a Imperial Officer Warlord or a Mage Dynastic Ally. The Mage cannot be a Warlord, but because she can be a Dynastic Ally, that allows her to effectively be a Warlord regardless, so bear that in mind. I just think that rapid deployment has proven itself over, years of conquest now to be such a valuable ability because it's going to kick in every single game no matter what. It's always going to be something you're going to want to use, and it's always going to make a difference at competitive play because the idea of the game is to get into the midfield and really control a midfield before your opponent does and get a lead on scoring, and rapid deployment certainly helps you to do that. Also, if a lot of your stuff is relatively slow, having the ability to sort of get right in the midfield and deal with other things of your opponent that might be marching up, with a double move of 7 or 8 is quite important there as well. Family traditions, so this is for feudal, that's going to be the noble lord kind of character. This one's a bit more interesting because it gives your regiments veteran, which is not really a big deal. I mean, it saves you a few points here and there. But the interesting part of it is where it says that Regiments and character stands in the army also gain the Dynastic Allies subfaction battlefield role. So let's just explain how that works, because it's actually a bit of a tricky one, and it is a very interesting rule. So if I go Noble Lord, and he's in his men-at-arms and his household guard, etc., we've got this warband here, and we select him as the Warlord. He's got family traditions, which appears up here, right? So then let's go and grab the Theist Priest as our secondary guy. That's going to be the Priest in the Militia. You go up here. Let me just make this a bit clearer. So you go up here, and suddenly the Noble Lord, if we make this guy the Dynastic Ally, in fact, let's leave that unchecked. Noble Lord has the Feudal character role, and these guys are Feudal and Imperial and Veterans. Great, they're Feudal and Veterans. The reason why they're receiving the Veteran tag is because Family Traditions just dishes it out to everybody in his army there. And if you then go to Theist Priest and check Dynastic Ally, that's going to mean that the Noble Lord becomes a Theist, and the men become a Theist, and the household guard as well. So with them all tagged as Theists, the interaction is that when you use your Theist Priest's ability, Spirit Shines, and he casts a free spell and it affects all friendly Theist regiments, that's going to mean that on your Supremacy turn for the Priest, you put up something like this, Heavenly Blessing, and the regiment gains Blessed. That is going to give all of these other guys Blessed as well for one turn, which is pretty sick, if you ask me. So that's actually quite a good secondary warlord to have, and I think you'll see quite a few armies that have both the Imperial Officer and the Family Traditions combo there, because the Imperial Officer, what he does is that he's got really good maneuverability, he's got the Vanguard, as well as we'll see later, the Reforms, etc., and the free spell of having Blessed on your entire army pretty much with Theist is another really good interaction. Now, obviously, there's a few other combos you can choose from. You can do it with the orders, etc., but we'll talk about that a little bit later. All right, so March of the Faithful, this is where your Warlord is a Theist. So, in fact, let's just go back to this example. It works the other way around. So you've got the Theist, you have spread the Theist tag around to everybody. You are also picking up this ability as well, because your Dynastic Ally will get the subfaction rule. So Theists in the army gain Divine Presence. That is found right at the bottom of the PDF. Sorry, you've got to scroll all the way down to find this thing, which says that when you cast your spell on a regiment or becomes a target of a spell, it can add +2 to the first march or to the charge, which is a little bit of extra mobility. We always love that. And I assume that your entire army is going to get the benefit of that on the Supremacy turn, although it does say target of this spell. So I better just check the wording of that. If we go to Spirit Shines, when a friendly Theist spells... yeah, so it actually does specifically say the word targeted, which is quite good wording on their behalf, because it says when you target a friendly Theist regiment, all other friendly regiments on the battlefield that are Theists are also targeted in that wording. So that's going to effectively make your entire army faster and have Blessed, etc. It's a bit of a wombo combo. So Relentless Drills, we saw that already. Let's come back down to Martial Prowess. This is probably the weakest one in my opinion. If you have the Orders character as one of your Warlord or Dynastic Allies, then you simply get Flurry on the character stands and the characters, not like the entire regiment. So if you've got a whole bunch of... Crimson Tower Knights are not all getting Flurry. So Martial Prowess is kind of useful. What's really important is more so the First Blessing. So if you actually look at the Supremacy ability, the activated upgrade for the Order character is giving you +1 attacks and hardened at the same time, which is better than what they had before on the Supremacy turn. Although, to be fair, they also had Blessed previously, so... Yeah, this is something which kind of helps out Ashen Dawn more than anything else, because previously Ashen Dawn had to choose between +1 attacks or hardened. They now get both, but your Crimson Tower Knights, for example, only get this instead of Blessed, so I don't know how to feel about that. Orders, maybe not the best option compared to what you're getting over here. I really prefer Rapid Deployment as my #1 pick, followed by Family Traditions, followed by March of the Faithful, followed by Martial Prowess. So, yeah, what I quite like to do here is take the Imperial Officer in pretty much every list, and then the dynastic ally, usually one of the theist characters, so I can get family tradition. Or the other way you can go is, I suppose you could go family tradition plus theist, or a combination of these top two. Anyway, let's move on to the actual supremacy abilities. So the other reason, I guess, why you want to include your Imperial Officer in this is that he also has the best supremacy ability in the sense that you get a free reform for every veteran unit. Note that it doesn't say every Imperial unit, so it says veteran infantry. So these guys over here who are feudal theists, for example, so long as they're upgraded to veterans, which you can easily do for 5 points there, they're going to be included in it. So in this style of list, if you have, Imperial Officer in there, this unit could be one of the units that gets a free reform. Same with these guys who are easily veterans. If you have a combination of the Officer and the Noble Lord, for example, so he's giving you combat maneuvers, and everybody in the army is pretty much veterans, and the Noble Lord is turning these guys into Imperials, etc., etc. So they're all getting the Vanguard onto the field, and they're all getting the free reform on Supremacy turn, which is a big deal. Opportunists as well. So the other thing about that you don't really want to miss out on is the fact that the Imperial Officer, these days, his warband is going to look something like this. It's going to quite often include 2 crossbows, 2 cadre. And the thing is that these guys will also get rerolls shooting in the flank because of opportunists as well, which is kind of sickening. So that's why this warband here is going to be very, very common in 100 Kingdoms. And you look at how cheap it is, just 640 points. You probably want to make that one unit veteran if they're not already veteran. And then that guy becomes the warlord, and that's pretty much the only points you need to spend on this warband, and it's already nutty. So I think his supremacy ability is probably the best. Note that this is also gained by having the mage. So if you don't have the Imperial Officer in there, but the mage is a dynastic ally, you can still get away with that. Professional troops was typically one of the weaker ones because rerolling 6 on clash and defense rolls didn't usually result in many additional defense rolls passed or clash rolls actually succeeded, because you're still going to be rolling on 3s or 4s a lot of the time, and 6s doesn't really constitute a great proportion of the dice that you're rolling. The thing is that now the Noble Lord is also going to get the Family Edition's feudal bonuses, and I believe that, let me just check this. If I take this away, I think the Crusader Lord has it as well, doesn't he? Crusading Noble Lord, you add the Household Guard and make him the Warlord. No, he's got March of the Faithful because he's not feudal, he's theist, excuse me. So this is just the Noble Lord and the Mounted Noble Lord. So getting the reroll 6s, we've tried and play tested this a lot, and it hasn't been as impactful. I will notice, however, that it's not restricted to infantry, so because it works in your Household Knights are now a lot tankier than they were before, and because Household Knights no longer have the speed of horse upgrade that you could take with them in the past, they are less of a shock troop, they're less aggressive, and they're more like a defensive anvil. I don't love that. I'm not really a big fan of that change, but given that's what we've got, that's what you should be using it for if you're going to have a warlord who is a noble lord. We did talk about the Spirit Shines. I think this has been buffed significantly. Previously, what you had to do is you had to take 1 or 2 Theist Priests and you sort of cast 1 spell on your own unit, and you have to roll to succeed it. So now it's actually a free automatic roll, and it's out of sequence. The other thing about this Supremacy ability is it just happens before you start activating anything. So you get this on your regiments for free before you activate, you win the roll, you activate your Household Guard, and they go chop something up. So it's actually very, very powerful now, and given the fact that you're able to expand the Theist tag to a lot of other things in your army, I think it's actually very, very strong. So I'd rate the Spirit Shines as a lot more powerful than professional troops. Is it better than combat maneuvers? I think that depends a bit on the context of your list, but they're both right up there, and that's why personally I'll probably have a lot of lists which have a combination of these. First Blessing, again, we talked about that. It's restricted to just the orders, so realistically realistically, you can't spread that around the rest of your army in the same way that you're able to spread these around. So combat maneuvers is veterans, and every warband can have veterans. Professional troops is all feudal stuff, so that's going to be quite a lot of things as well. Spirit Shines is all theist, and you can spread that around. But First Blessing is really just quite restricted. I feel like the orders aren't really going to be a very powerful sub-faction in 100 Kingdoms until they make the further changes for Order of the Sword and Lazarus and some of the other regiments that are going to be coming out. We will talk about the Order of the Shield guy, who I think is kind of cool, but for now, I think this update is more about the theists and the Imperial officers of this world. So I think it's time now we just run through Army Builder, and I'll sort of explain some of the combos and the builds that I'm particularly interested in, right? So let's go up here. Let's just go top to bottom. So Chapter Mage. The thing about her now is you want to take her in just one unit of mercenary crossbowmen, and you want to click the veteran tag. Unless something else in your army is giving them veteran automatically, you go and tick that button, and she is now a scoring unit, which is a really big deal. She cannot take Kiss Farewell anymore, which is annoying. It's annoying. So you're just going to be Barrage 4, range 18, not the same range of the crossbowmen. It's kind of an annoying thing to keep track of. It is what it is. Spells, what they've done is they've actually kind of balanced out the schools, but they've still given each school one good spell and one bad spell. So +1 resolve is not really that useful, but the fire dart is. They have kind of nerfed it by taking away the armor piercing. It's AP1 now at the exchange of being easier to cast. So it's going to go off better, and it's going to hit more frequently, but the AP2 was really nice. It's a shame to have lost that. School of Water, they have nerfed. They don't give you the free 3 successes plus each dice roll now. They just make it attunement 4. So rather than having a cap of 9 wounds, you get a cap of 6 effectively. I don't love that change. I thought it was really kind of like an interesting choice with a max of 9, and even then, the games that I tried it out, it still wasn't broken, still wasn't overpowered, but given that they've nerfed it, I just don't really love it anymore. The only reason why I'd consider taking this school is the fact that if you lose one of your stands, you no longer become scoring if you started with 4. So to get yourself top backed up to 4, you might want to have that. Obscured against enemy volleys, I mean, casting a spell just to get that, that's not going to come up that much. School of Earth has got this stone spikes thing now, which gives pike formation, which is interesting. Like, I think that's really cool, but bear in mind you have to activate your mage right before you get charged by an enemy regiment, so it's not all that reliable, and Earth to Mud is still a terrible spell in my opinion. School of Air, you're effectively taking an entire spell just to make your regiment shoot slightly better, and it doesn't shoot particularly well to begin with, so I'd really prefer Fire. So when we come down to Mastery, she's got this new thing called Talented, which gives you 2 schools, so if you're going to cough up the 20 points for that, my pick would be School of Fire and School of Water, just because School of Fire is what you're going to be spending like most of your spells on, and then occasionally you'll go School of Fire because you want to get the unit size back for scoring, or you might be in a desperate situation where you're about to lose some, like, your Noble Lord's unit to shooting and you want to top them back up again. That would be my way to go with the mage. Bear in mind, you can only use 1 spell per turn, so you're still restricted in that way. Protective Glyphs over here, that is kind of interesting, but again, you're spending your 15-point allotment. If you're going to be using an upgrade like that, I think I'd probably rather spend the additional 5 points to get Talented. All of these other upgrades are not really worth it for the mage. Even Art of War, I think that's probably better off on one of the other characters. Or maybe not. I guess it doesn't really matter which character it's on. And none of these ones particularly help that unit a great deal. So that's how the mage is going to be looking a lot of the cases. Honestly, I think if you just go School of Fire and spend no more points on her, that's fine for the mage. Crusading Noble Lord's the new guy, really cool new character. He's very similar to the non-Crusading Noble Lord, and his warband is very similar, as you can see, but he is a theist. So his supremacy is differently, and his subfaction is different, and he can take Crusaders and Sakai, which is kind of interesting. So I think the build that interests me the most with this guy is where you've got him as the warlord, and you take a massive unit of Household Guard, let's take 8, and we'll take the Arms Master to give them a bit of extra clash, and we'll take a unit of Household Knights, right? So that's our warband for the Crusading Noble Lord. Then we'll come down here and we will grab the Priest, right? So the Priest is the dynastic ally. Priest can take, I don't know, a group of militia or something like that. All you need to take is 3 militia, and you get scoring, as we already talked about, right? Because they're going to be a group of 4. You get +1 resolve, and that just gives them the ability to seize a zone. So with him as the dynastic ally, you're going to have that one turn where everything that is a theist is going to get the benefit of the spell. Now, you don't need the feudal lords kind of subfaction which spreads out the theist, because the Crusading Noble Lord is himself a theist, and mainly that supremacy turn is going to be wanting to get your spell on this big fat unit of Household Guard, right? So that's a really, really cool way to go. And then you go to the Crusading Noble Lord, and you come down here and you grab the Elysian Fragment, which previously was only something you could take on the Theist Priest and the Mage, but now because you have a new combat priest, effectively, you can take this fragment. It has changed. It's no longer Smite, it's Cleave 3, so it will be susceptible to Hardened, and if they're Defense 4, they can't totally get around your defense. But the thing is, you can now use it on Household Guard, which are much more reliable at hitting things and surviving long enough to see a turn of combat. And of course, they're going to have support 3 when they're veterans because of advanced infantry training. So if you click that button, they've got Theist, they've got support 4. Well, that shouldn't say support 4, that's a bug. It should be support 3. But now you've got a regiment which can actually really lash out and thrash. The other thing is you've got these upgrades for the Crusader here where okay, Divine Purpose, don't really need that. Banish the Darkness is my favorite because you've got Oblivious, Cast Out the Demon, Terrifying 1. I don't love it just because you're going to be up against Old Dominions sometimes and Fearless units, but having Oblivious really helps in a big fat unit of Household Guard because normally they would lose a lot of casualties to resolve checks. Now you can actually halve that number and keep them around. And Masteries, if you want to spend even more points on them, you could take something like Eccentric Fighting Style or Flank. And this really makes this guy an absolute beat stick, and you're going to have a turn where you're Cleave 3, even when he's not Cleave 3, he's Cleave 2, etc., etc. So this is actually a really, really powerful setup where you've got that Household Guard doing much more than a unit of Household Guard ever could in the past. Another kind of build I like here is just to actually subtract the Dynastic Ally there and leave the Priest there, and just manually cast it onto this unit, because they've got... they should have Devout from the Crusading Noble Lord. So he'll add Devout onto the Household Guard, and then the Priest can cast spells on the Noble Lord if you want. But furthermore, we can go down and grab Imperial Officer and make the Officer the Dynastic Ally. So the difference there is that you can actually get Vanguard on pretty much everything here, and your Supremacy turn is going to allow you to get the free reform on units like the Household Guard. So you've got a big block of 8 of them with the character, so it's like 3 by 3. If you want to spread out to like a 10 by 2 and pivot around a little bit so that the corner of your unit is closer to their unit, you're going to be in automatic charge range from a really long way away, and then you charge in, and you can still use the Elysian Fragment, and you may not need the benefit of Blessed or anything like that, but you could wait for Blessed to kick in, and that makes this kind of setup really, really effective. So that's one thing I'm quite interested in. Let's briefly talk about the Archangel. So this is a new monster for 100 Kingdoms. I thoroughly disagree with the fact that they have added a monster to 100 Kingdoms. This should not be the faction of monsters. This is the infantry and cavalry faction, and it's just annoying to me that they decided to do a bit of a money grab and go, okay, cool, let's just make a monster for people because we know they're going to buy it regardless. I disagree with that. I will never be a fan of the Archangel. That being said, I will proxy it with a little diorama that has a knight on it, and that will be my thing, just to give me more, you know, I want to have more diversity and variation in the games I play and the mechanics I use. So I'll still use the actual entry in the army builder, but I won't have the big monster. Some people love the miniature. That's great. If you guys enjoy it, that's all cool. But for me, just don't really like it. But I will comment on the rules of it in the context of the video while we're talking about the theists. And the first decision you have to make is whether to take the sword version or the shield and spear. So they're both kind of cool. The sword version gives you this charge which causes 7 smite hits, which is powerful, or free kill on the objective. And the other option effectively requires you to get some hits first, and then it grants regeneration up to 5, depending on the number of hits you did, to nearby Theist infantry regiments. Bear in mind that in this style of this, it could be the household guard. So helps them to be healed up 5 wounds every time the Archangel makes a swing. So it's kind of hard to choose between these two different options until you look at this paragraph here and you see right at the bottom, oh, by the way, it gets a shield, which is effectively just +1 defense to your Archangel unless they're attacking from the side or they have line breaker. And because of that +1 defense there, it's an absolute no-brainer to me that you would go for the shield and spear 100% of the time, because in so many games you're going to get shot at and you're going to get hit from the front with clash, and the +1 defense is going to be incredibly valuable. And because you're going to be getting some value from the creature either way, depending on regardless of whether you went the smite route or the regen route, the shield is really the kicker. The Archangel at 260 points is very expensive, but is it worth it? I would say yes, if you are running a predominantly Theist-themed list. So it's not really a good add-on to what you're doing with the Orders, for example, and a lot of feudal like knights and stuff. But in this kind of setup that I'm building here right now, the priest is the dynastic ally, you've got the noble lord in there, etc. Then that's sort of how you'd want to roll. It's actually given me a pop-up error here, by the way. I didn't realize Dynastic Ally cannot share the same subfaction battlefield role as the Warlord. Right, okay, so because the Crusading Noble Lord is giving you the Spirit Shines, you don't have to make the Theist Priest your dynastic ally, because you're getting it anyway. Sorry, I missed that. So what you're going to be doing in this list is you're going to be going back to the Imperial Officer, and you're going to be getting the best of both worlds here by putting your officer in, and you've got all of this stuff here, and this guy being the dynastic ally is going to mean that you get the reform on all your veterans, and you're going to get Vanguard and all your Imperial stuff, and then the Noble Lord, because he's the Lord, he's going to give the Theist Priest a free spell anyway. So this is actually kind of killer, because this regiment here is going to get the Vanguard, it's going to get the free reform on the Supremacy turn. You can't use this guy's Supremacy on the same turn that you use this guy's one, but depending on the situation, you might want to get the free reform in the charge, or you might just want to get the Blessed on your unit. You can use Elysian Fragment either way, in either situation, and then you absolutely F them up. So we've even got enough points for 1 more regiment, or even 2 more, so chuck some men-at-arms in there, give these guys a few more upgrades. You might even prefer Steel Legion or something like that in there. You could certainly afford it. And that is the kind of list that I'm really, really interested in playing with 100 Kingdoms at the moment. So yeah, Noble Lord, Crusading Noble Lord. So you give Theist everything in your warband, and they get Indomitable, which is awesome. And he's actually a pretty good fighter. So I'm actually a really big fan of that specific build. Let's move on a little bit. The Errant of the Order of the Shield. This guy is a character that was available as a unit upgrade for the militia previously, and it was just a unit upgrade, not a character. And now they've made it into a character, which is kind of interesting. This guy is like a peasant version of the Orders, and being a character that has the battlefield role of the Orders, you can't also take the Crusading Noble Lord or the Theist Priest that we were just talking about, right? You can't do that at the same time. But the interesting thing is that this guy is allowed to have militia, which have the Theist tag, but they're not a character, which is really interesting. So even though the Orders can't be in the same army list as Theist characters, they can be in the same army list as Theist troops. So that allows you to take a bunch of these guys, and you can still take an heirloom like the Elysian Fragment, which is going to work on Theist infantry, right? So you can give them cleave 3, and this guy's going to be a scoring unit because your militia are going to be veterans. In fact, he gives them veterans either way. And let's see what else he does. So they get fearless. That's really helpful for militia. This one here, like Gods Amongst Men, this means that if your Ashen Dawn or your Crimson Tower or any sort of cavalry orders charge something, all of your infantry within 8 get a free rally and get inspired. Now, that's not going to come up very much, and when it does, it's not going to be that impactful. You don't want to forget that you have the rule, because there might be a clutch situation where you've got some crossbows sitting on a zone, and some men-at-arms, let's say, and they get shot at after they've activated and they're broken, so they can't score anymore, and they've already activated that turn, so you can't rally them. But then suddenly you have a charge with your Ashen Dawn nearby, which takes out some other enemy unit, and they're within 8 inches of those little men-at-arms that just got shocked and broken. You can rally them, and that could be game-winning in a very rare situation. So don't forget that you have it, but it's not going to come up all of that much. All right, so this character is not, doesn't have particularly impressive stats, but Resolve 4 is definitely better than what the Priest had for the Militia, if I recall correctly. The Priest being Resolve 3, yep, so it's an upgrade. So he's better at leading them. These guys, of course, can score, being veterans and having, the ability to have the Relentless Drills upgrade there. Servite says you can only take that if your character is an Orders character, so this is really the only guy who can give them that. +1 March and Resolve is really, really nice. Neophyte he gets Fearless anyway, so I wouldn't recommend that Neophyte upgrade in this particular context. But the other thing about the Order of the Shield guy, that is relevant, is that he can actually take Ashen Dawn without requiring other expensive knights. You would never want to bother with any of the other ones in this context, unless your miniature collection just didn't include, Ashen Dawn for some reason. These guys are still incredibly powerful. They haven't been nerfed any further. They're very, very strong. And you've got First Blessing here from the Order of the Shield guy to give them the +1 attacks and Hardened. And of course, their command stand will have Flurry. So, yeah, this is a new way of putting Ashen Dawn in your list without using Crimson Tower Knights or Sealed Temple, which is a big deal. I would say if you feel attracted to the kind of list that has this, where you've got the Crimson Towers and Ashen Dawn, and then this bunch here as well, which you can do, by the way, then you have to shave down the points cost a little bit, like if we do this and drop this down a little bit, just something like that. This can look attractive for the 4 stands of Ashen Dawn and the 2 of Crimson Tower, but it's not really a good tournament list because you've got 6 heavies in there. So on turn 3, you're going to auto-pick 1 and then bring on maybe 1 or 2 more, and then the next turn you'll bring 1 or 2 more units, and then by turn 5 you'll still have stuff plotting onto the battlefield, and it just won't be fast enough. But having said that, a build that I really like is something like this, where you've got the Militia and you've got the Elysian Fragment in there with the Order of the Shield, and you've got your Ashen Dawn. You can have this kind of setup without having to without having to go through the route of having the Prior Commander in your list. So if we then come over to the Noble Lord, note that you can't take the Crusading Noble Lord because he's a Theist character. So this Noble Lord is a good alternative for still including your Household Guard in there, and then you take some more guys like this, take some knights. If this guy's going to be a warlord, he gives the knights the reroll 6s for their defense rolls, which is quite good for tanking. Then, of course, you come down here and grab the officer. He's going to take some crossbows, some more crossbows, and some Hundakadra, and some Hundakadra, and he's going to be a warlord, dynastic ally. So we've got too many points in here somehow. I think what you've got to do is you've got to trim down the Household Guard a little bit and the Knights a little bit. But you can sort of see where we're going with this, right? This is a way of effectively having, you do this. You have 1 unit of Ashen Dawn. That looks a lot more sensible because then Ashen Dawn are a really good trump card for turn 3, and they are only heavy, so everything else is sort of coming in turn 2-ish. And you've got tons of scoring units, and you've got a ton of mobility here, and you've got this absolute bomb with the Elysian Fragment nuking somebody, and late game you can fight off, you know, something pretty heavy with your Ashen Dawn. But for the mid game, this kind of setup really shreds in the mid game, because they're typically coming on with just a few sort of weaker units, and you've got this massive army which is very mobile and tons of shooting, tons of scoring. So that's another build that I like for the Order of the Shield. So really cool character, quite admire him. Moving on, we just talked about the Imperial Officer a fair bit, so I will mention that with battlefield drills, you can actually choose 2 different targets at the start of each turn, rather than having to rely on using draw events, which is something which you might not get in time. This is another buff for the Imperial Officer, and I think because of this, and because of his sub-faction ability and his combat maneuvers, that triple whammy and his points being fairly reasonable for all of that, this makes him clearly the best character of the faction. Still, he's undefeated. So forward force, free flank, that's another biggie. That's something that makes a big difference. Brace for impact for hardened, that's the main one you're going to use most of the time. On your feet, this is a rally. I mean, I guess that's kind of important, because if you start the turn broken and you were going to be charging something if you won the roll, that clears the way to get the charge off, and your opponent might not be expecting that. So let's say you've got a big block of Gilded Legion and your opponent has broken you, and they're thinking, aha, I could just pick some other card or whatever to go first, and you can go, well, after the Supremacy phase, I'm going to make those Gilded Legion rally, and then I'm going to draw them first, and I'm going to charge you, which you weren't expecting. So that can be quite a big deal. Iron Discipline within range of an objective zone, that's not going to come up very much, because Iron Discipline allows them to keep the support and the not re-rolling morale checks. Typically, if you get charged in the flank, you're probably going to be dying regardless, but it may occasionally come up. And Aim for the Head, this is also hard to get off, because you've got to be within 12 inches and you've got to aim. But if you're starting the turn and you're already looking at them in the flank with your Hunter Cadre or your Mercenary Crossbows from like point blank range, and you are in range for the Imperial Officer to dish that out as well, and provided they're not, fearless or whatever it is, provided they're not Old Dominion, then Murderous Volley could inflict some morale checks from the shooting there, which is pretty nice. I will mention the Armor of Dominion. This is one heirloom that this guy likes to take if you are using Gilded Legion. It has changed a little bit. Or has it? I don't think it has actually changed, really. It's pretty much the same ability, excuse me. So that's not too much different. Mask of Eclides is another really good one for more Indomitable. That's a really cheap item, and it's very good if you're like 10 points under the points limit, you've got nothing else to spend 10 points on. That's a really good one to use, by the way. Callid Burn's another really good one, because it just straight up causes the enemy to reroll all defense rolls from charge, clash, and volley. Especially good on a priority commander for the impact hits as well, effectively. So that's a really good one. What else did I want to comment on? St. Nicholas, that's slightly different now. It's Divine Purpose, so that could potentially give you a bit of extra speed. That's not bad. And for Masteries, the other one I wanted to point out was Art of War. This seems pretty appropriately costed at 30 points. It's useful in the early game and can help you in situations where you've got like the same number of cards as your opponent, but you really wanted to have that last activation. That could be a big deal, but there are going to be a lot of situations where it doesn't really do anything as well, so do watch out for that. Eccentric fighting style hasn't really changed, but it's still very, very good, especially on your character that's going to be using Elysian Fragment or is going to be doing a lot of upfront combat. Excuse me. Alrighty. Mounted Noble Lord no longer gives out the beautiful +1 impact and reroll 6s on impacts. And he's very expensive, so that's kind of annoying. He is feudal, so he's got the feudal subfaction, family traditions. And the reroll 6s is useful on knights, and knights are also mainstay. They are not restricted in this particular warband. So if you want to just take knights and then move on to to some other warband, that's great. But the Knights just not really the shock value that they were before. Another thing that annoys me that I think that I really disagree with Parabellum on is that Oliphant's Roar can only be used in the Household Knights, not the Crimson Tower Knights. Crimson Tower Knights have received a buff in the sense that they've got Devastating Charge, blah, 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 but I really feel like Oliphant's Roar should have been at least an option. It wouldn't have been too overpowered, I assure you. His upgrades here have changed a little bit, so you've still got Cleave, you've got Flurry, and you've got +1 Clash, but you've also got this, which Tawny Champion used to be the name of the upgrade to the Household Knights, which made them charge further. You can't have that anymore. I don't know why they keep taking stuff away from Household Knights. It makes no sense to me, but you can give this to your character, giving him +2 impacts. That, I suppose, is quite good if you go with something like Caliburn, because then they're re-rolling successful defense rolls against all of your impacts as well. And he starts at Clash 3, which is quite nice for that. In terms of masteries, eccentric fighting style, I suppose, is a good one, but so is Tip of the Lance for Wedge. The Knights don't have Wedge naturally, so there is that. I don't think I'll be playing a lot of Mounted Noble Lord, to be fair. I'm just not seeing it, because the things that the other characters in this faction can do are so good. I just don't see. I don't see a great place for him, to be fair. I think if you are going to take him, he should be relying more on the Clash than the Impact hits. I don't really think that the Impact 3, Clash 3 for a lot of these guys is worth it. He does give them Veterans, which obviously gives them a bit of extra Clash, but you're not getting the rerolls, and it's only Impact 3, so not super reliable, and Brutal Impact 1 as well, not the best. Tip of the Lance, really handy. Let me just go back to this eccentric fighting style. Now, a funny trick is also the fact that if you go back to the Theist Priest, by the way, and make him the dynastic ally, because he's a feudal character, the Knights become Theists. So what you can do is, if you really want to, you can go Elysian Fragment on the Knights, which is comical, because these guys, to be fair, they do charge from a fair long way away, and yeah, Clash 3, they're reasonable, and they get the rerolls to hit on the 6s. So they're going to go from Clash 3 up to 4 with Inspired, rerolling the 6s from the Noble Lord, and they're going to be Cleave 3. So that's one fun sort of meme list to play with them, is to have the Theist Priest in there as well. Let me just check Spirit Shines really quick. Okay, so this ability is not restricted to infantry units. It's any Theist regiment. So you can get the free spell from Spirit Shines. The Knights then get a free spell from the Theist Priest for the turn. What might that look like? +1 evasion, not that helpful. Heavenly Blessing, obviously that is quite helpful. Fervor, Flurry for the command standard characters, not great. Divine Sanction, yeah, well, they're going to be using Elysian Fragment. So, Blessed. I mean, you can reroll the 5s as well as the 6s, I suppose. It's not a big difference, but if you really want to hammer the point home, you can go with it. I still don't love them. Let's have a look at Longbowmen. So they get +1 volley if the Veterans within effective range. I don't love it, because the range, it's going to be 12 inches effective, and you're wanting to keep your Longbowmen a really long way away from the enemy and rely on their normal range of 22. So that's a shame. I feel like if professional troops allow you to reroll 6s for volley actions as well on feudal units like the Longbowmen, that would have been interesting. That would have made me go, okay, let's take another look at them. But for now, I don't think they're that good. I mean, if you want, you could take a unit of 4 and they can score. So there you go, and the Veterans that way. So that's one way you could do it. But I'm not seeing Mounted Noble Lord as my number 1 pick. He's definitely usable, but not number 1. Noble Lord over here. This is the kind of guy that you want to put in the list that I talked about before, where you're getting a free reform turn from the Household Guard, potentially the Theist Priest activating on him. If he makes his Household Guard Theist, they're going to get the Elysian Fragment option, and you can do all of that without having to run into the conflict with the Order of the Shield. So if you want Ashen Dawn in your list, but you also want Household Guards in your list, then the Noble Lord is a great way to go still. He is also a very, very good fighter when you factor in Weapon Master and Graceful Combatant, which should be the 2 that you pick, plus Eccentric Fighting Style. And then if you take Caliburn there as well, Caliburn is not re-rolling hits. You're already getting that from Eccentric Fighting Style, so there's no overlap. They have to re-roll the defense roll rerolls, and he's naturally cleave 1 there with Weapon Master. So your 8 attacks at Clash 3 plus maybe Inspired, and all the rerolls, you're going to be getting close to 8 hits, and then they have to reroll all of their armor saves. He's an absolute beast in duels, bearing in mind that he'll have to reroll his own defense rolls. There's that, I mean, I'll briefly talk about Euroni, but there's this one character in the new faction that forces you to accept duels, so it could be kind of comical if he comes up against the Noble Lord and they have to actually kill each other quite handily this way, but this guy absolutely shreds with Caliburn and all of these other upgrades, so that's one thing that you can look at doing with your boy there. His warband hasn't changed a great deal as far as I can see. Coming down to the Priority Commander, so if you are really keen on going in with the orders, and personally I will play some games that have that warband in it, just because I love that warband. I think it's really, really cool. So if you're playing this style where you're sort of splitting it up and not really getting much overlap in value, and you're taking the Imperial Officer as well, you're almost hitting your points limit there. So let me just grab the Mage, and we'll chuck in the Mercenary Crossbowman. That needs to be Veteran, she needs to be School of Fire, and he needs to be in the Veterans as well. You still got 60 points left. This guy's going to be a Warlord. He's going to grab... well, you can't... Oliphant's Roar doesn't affect orders, which is annoying. If I go Caliburn there, and if I go Eccentric Fighting Style there, we've still got 10 points left, so I'll just grab the Mask of Eclides there for this guy. So this list is a list that you can play. It does have 4 heavies in it, so you might be showing up turn 5 and the Ashen Dawn are just barely arriving. But if you want to play the new style of orders and have the Priority Commander in there, he does buff these units quite well, and Devastating Charge is an upgrade for these guys, giving them +1 impact and line breaker. So your unit here is going to be going in at impact 5 and ignoring shield. So when you're charging initiates or a regiment like that, you're going to absolutely crush them. And this guy is an absolute beast in close combat here. It attacks 8, rerolling everything, and they're rerolling all their defenses, and he's got Terrifying on top of that. He's got a Flurry, of course, if he didn't already need it, and all of the character stands, command stands here have got Flurry. So it's still a pretty brutal warband. It's definitely more powerful than it was before. It just doesn't benefit from any of the stuff that this does over here. Combat maneuvers is infantry regiments, and the sub-faction ability for the Imperial Officer is just for infantry regiments as well. So unfortunately, you're not going to vanguard on with your Ashen Dawn. Wouldn't that be nice? That'd be pretty cool. And the Mage there, just to fill in points effectively. So that is one list that I will play, but overall, because there's not a lot of overlap there, and because it's quite a late game kind of list without a lot of presence in turn 3 and 4, then I probably prefer some of the other builds that I've been showing you. And obviously, an improvement on what I just showed you would be the Sealed Temple version, where you've got these guys because they're mediums, and then you take the Ashen Dawn. So if you're going to be doing a build like what I just talked about, this is probably better in terms of scoring. Only problem with this, though, is that you're not getting the juicy upgrades the Crimson Tower just kicked you in with the Devastating Charge. These guys generally haven't been buffed. You are forced to take a Standard Bearer with them now, which kind of makes them more expensive. So there is that problem. This guy has lost Quicksilver Strikes, which would have been awesome with what we talked about there with Eccentric Fighting Style Caliburn. That's a real shame. So yeah, Priority Commanders, maybe not the best pick. And then we've got the Theist Priest down here, who can take Crusaders and can take Sakai and Archangel. This is how you get these units. Archangel, we did talk about a little bit there. Crusaders, I think, they're more expensive than Men-at-Arms, and they do something similar. It's just they're a bit tougher. Yeah, I mean, Flawless Strikes is nice. Overall, I love the miniatures. I really want to build some with flails, etc. I'm just having a bit of trouble working them into my lists, considering that when I take infantry, I kind of want them to do as much, work as possible or as little work as possible, and they seem to be like a middle ground in between Household Guard and Men-at-Arms, if you know what I'm saying. So they don't quite perform the role that I would expect them to. Yeah, they are a bit of a better bunker than the militia are, but the militia are much cheaper, so you can still score with the militia if the veterans and the priests sit in them. Sakai, exactly the same reason that I just mentioned. You know, you either want them to absolutely shred or just to sit there on the objective doing nothing. And they have lost Lethal Demise, which kind of annoys me. I thought that was a really cool flavor for them to have. Divine Purpose, obviously, you can get that on your troops anyway from Theists. And they don't quite work as well as I believe that the Household Guard are going to. Household Guard are going to be led by your Noble Lord, etc. I suppose you can try it. If they start Support 2, oh no, they can't become Support 3 because that's an advanced training thing that you get on your Household Guard. No, I just prefer Household Guard in this update, to be honest. Support 1 comes from advanced infantry training, so yeah, if you could get to Support 3 with them, that'd be kind of interesting, but as it stands, I love the models, and I will buy them and assemble them because they look cool, but that's all I really think of them. It's a bit of a shame, really, all the new stuff being, you know, a little bit dull. And that, my friends, is most of what I wanted to say. There is some stuff that I missed. There are some heirlooms and things that I haven't really gone over. But overall, I think we should try them out and have some games with them. And really hoping to play against the new, the sparkly, shiny new faction as well. I'll put some things in TTS to try them out as well, some proxies. But the main thing is to be getting the Imperial Officer and his boys on the field. We've got a game day coming up this weekend, so I'll provide a bat rep or two after that. And yeah, I feel the first build that I'm going to be trying is either going to be the Order of the Shield with 1 Ashen Dawn and then Noble Lord Imperial Officer, or it's going to be Crusading Noble Lord with the Fragment and the Household Guard. I'm going to be buying some more Household Guards so I can get up to 8 of them. That's going to be killer. Given that I don't have 8 of them yet, I probably will start off with my first game being the Order of the Shield with that build that I showed you earlier with the militia. So Order of the Shield, 6 militia, Ashen Dawn, and then Noble Lord, Imperial Officer, etc. That'll be really cool. Good stuff. Well, thanks for watching, guys, and let me know what you think in the comments.